I was elected district attorney for 2 terms as the first woman elected attorney general of the state of California. I was a United States Senator, second black woman elected in the history of the United States Senate. And I was the first woman Vice President of the United States.
That is a decent resume, but go ahead.
Well, some people have actually said I was the most qualified candidate ever to run for president.
I like the some people say. Very nice, but go ahead.
I'm just speaking fact.
Yeah.
Former Vice President Kamala Harris speaking there to podcaster Kara Swisher last week about her 2024 presidential bid. Some saying it was a bold claim from the former Democratic candidate.
Her comments come amid her book tour, which the former VP has become increasingly outspoken in her criticism of Trump, notably hurling a profanity-laced shot at the administration earlier this month. But during last Thursday's forum, Harris didn't save her criticism for the president alone. She had much to say about congressional Republicans and what she views as their contribution to the erosion of critical guardrails meant to limit the president's power.
The guardrails are failing to a great extent, and I did predict that. Mm-hmm. To your point, I predicted almost all of this, except I did not predict the capitulation. We've had complicit legislators who are Republicans and know what is wrong about this and are not stepping up, but they are living in fear of retribution and more invested in their own political survival than speaking up and taking the hits that might come.
Harris also had some words about Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his leadership of the department. Here's what she had to say.
When I see what these people are doing right now to end the war on cancer, to deny science and fire scientists, Kara, it's personal for me.
Yeah.
What they are doing to push misinformation and lies at the highest level of government, it's criminal. And people will die because of what they're doing. I can't laugh about that. I'm sorry.
Most qualified candidate ever.
I was hoping we weren't going to start with that because it's the most impossible to defend.
She's
but
not
go ahead.
even the most qualified candidate in the 2024 race. She was running against someone who had already been president.
Right. I mean, that was what I thought about whenever I first saw that clip, which is that if your argument is your resume makes you the most qualified, Biden was more qualified than she was. But Biden was like doddering by that.
First woman.
Woman.
She womaned really, really good there, Niall. It's just, this is not this doesn't convince anyone. It's not.
No, it's not. So before we get on to the parts where I agreed with her, let me acknowledge that that's just, I don't accept at all that she was the most qualified person ever to run for president. B, I think this sort of finger-wagging way she put it was kind of off-putting. And C, it is part of this, or she makes these comments as part of this book tour where she has been complaining about Team Biden didn't stand up for her enough, Joe Biden was distracting, she has objected when people criticize her for her position on Gaza, and she's like, I'm not president, basically, what are you asking me for, when it's completely valid to ask her about her positions when she was in a position of power, and various other things that are complaints on her part. It does get back to this thing where, look, in 2024, I think after that catastrophic debate performance, Democrats had to find someone else, and they couldn't jump over her because it would have split the party to jump over a incumbent.
There were no good options
president
left. By then, it was too late to do anything that made sense.
Probably.
Honestly, they're just,
yeah.
What can be done?
They were stuck then. Yeah. Now, all of that being said, I have sort of over several years just come to the conclusion that she's just not a particularly talented politician. I mean, I remember obviously when she first ran in 2020, where, there was a lot of sort of celebration of her in the early days of that campaign, and it just never really went anywhere and was never particularly effective. And she ended up dropping out before the Iowa caucuses. And, she has had some good moments. I have said before, I thought she won the only debate against Trump during the campaign, but she also had some bad moments, notably that interview on The View, where she was asked about things she'd do differently, and she was like, not a thing comes to mind. So I don't think she's a very talented or gifted politician. I think she will run again. I hope she doesn't get the Democratic nomination. There we are.
Yeah, I think her chances are going down every time I hear her speak now. That second clip, I think that's her practicing sounding more authoritative and speaking with the kind of conviction you were talking about in your notes. It just, and I don't mean to pick on her. It just, there's a hollowness to it that I detect even when she's a little bit more energetic and more worked up. She just doesn't convey authentic.
Right.
She conveys a kind of laid-back persona. She's a little bit boring to listen to in other long parts of that interview. And it's not, for me, it's not the most appealing format anyway. I'm not a big fan of Kara Swisher. That's who was interviewing her, actually. I
quite like
Kara
Swisher, but
Swisher is a well-regarded person. Her coverage of tech issues, I object to very strongly. I think she often reproduces the most fatalist or moral panic viewpoint on the development of tech, endorsing a very alarmist viewpoint, almost a Luddite viewpoint of the things that are happening. That has nothing to do with this interview. But so maybe I was not set up to enjoy it anyway. I think Kamala will go for it. I don't know why she's doing this if she wouldn't.
Yeah.
But I think her chances are diminishing as Gavin Newsom's star continues to rise. And then we still haven't, we don't know who else will appear,
right.
or AOC, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But she's also not, right now, in telling her story of what happened, she's not, again, she's fence sitting because the Biden people are mad at her that she's saying anything negative about them at all. But she certainly would need to say more strongly negative things about them to win any sort of goodwill from her own voters, from Democratic voters who are furious with the Biden administration, furious with Biden's handlers for concealing this from all of us. Or I think Democrats are furious that it was concealed from them. They're mad that they view that the horror of Trump has been foisted on them for a second time, much worse this time, because of the choices Biden and 5 people made. And they need someone to blame, and Biden has receded into has truly retired. So that person is going to be Kamala unless she breaks harder.
Yeah. I mean, look, as we have spoken before numerous times about the fact that Biden's decision fundamentally to run for a second term was the sort of original sin from which all other problems arose and put the Democratic Party in a very difficult position. Just to be fair to Kamala in terms of the parts that I did agree with her on, when she went on to the RFK Jr. stuff and the firing of scientists and all of that, I did agree with her there, and it is part of a broader issue where she also mentioned about the capitulation of Republicans to what she and I think are authoritarian impulses on Trump's part. And so that does get to a separate point, which is, even though I think she's not an especially talented politician, I do think she is well within the norms of American politics in a way that I view Trump as well outside of, and therefore a kind of dangerous and aberrational figure. I'd much rather be mildly irritated by Kamala Harris than fearful about the future of American democracy under Donald Trump. I
mean, it's difficult because as far as Trump goes, there's so much I disagree with, and then there's so much I do agree with. I in terms of the personal behavior and some of the more galling hypocrisies, and he again said, if you burn the American flag, you're going to prison. This is the most obviously protected right we have. You can't do that. You can try to do that. The Supreme Court's going to tell you can't. Stop. That's outside the bounds of normal. Most elected officials know as much as they'd like to. You just can't do that. Your FCC chairman just can't tell somebody, we're going to make life difficult for you unless you don't do that. And that stuff's appalling. On the other hand, the foreign policy he's achieving some real successes that I actually have serious reservations about whether a more normal politician, or Kamala Harris in particular, would have been able to achieve. So for me, it's the good and the bad, and I don't know where I land.
I mean, I come down in a different way on that. I do think it's valid to raise the foreign policy issues, and people say, could Kamala Harris have done that? there's a difference between could and would.
Right.
Theoretically, she had the power to do so. Would she have used it to lean on Israel, for example? I don't think she would.
She gave very little reason to think she would.
To think she would. I agree. Now, the difficulty I have is that I think that the examples of Trump that you cited, whether it's the flag burning, whether it's, having the FCC lean on people, whether it's the, various other, I would say, pressures being placed on colleges, law firms, et cetera, to me that undercuts the democratic fabric in such a fundamental way that it's not that I can't give credit for the foreign policy, it's that one weighs much differently to me than the other.
All right, then. We've got a lot more to talk about on Rising. Please stay with us.